Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of How to Leave a Cult. I am Brooke Walker. I am your host of How to Leave a Cult, and this is my story about being raised in a religious cult here in Arizona. And I also talk about tactics that many dysfunctional and abusive churches use and cults. And I also talk about the part that's how to leave a cult is really the part that I want to focus on as we begin to get closer to the end of my story, because I want people to understand that there's a lot that goes into coming out of religious abuse and how to heal that. So, welcome. Again, this is my biographical story, so you're definitely way into the middle of it. And today we're going to talk about a couple different things. The end of my last episode, prior to us getting into discussions with Lane Camp, I discussed getting into dating, and I'm going to go into some of that today because I want to kind of focus on the confusing messages that were always sent and the way that women were treated in the cult and the female male dynamic that occurred. The other thing I'm going to talk about is things that were just very much not allowed, drugs. So I'm going to talk about smoking pot and some incidents that happened there. So if this is your first time here, you're coming in midway. You may want to go back to some other episodes, but thank you so much for coming. Excited for you to share in the journey, and hopefully you get something out of it. So, in our last episode with me, prior to the ones with Lane, and we'll have some more episodes with Lane too. We're not done with his part of his story either. But I began talking about dating, talked about moving back to Mesa from Tonto Village, getting back into school. So I want to talk about some different things that went on during that time. And it's interesting every time I try to share like a story, I feel like there's so much that needs to be explained, because in the normal sense of sharing a story, if I just told you about something that happened, it's in the context of something that might be normal now, relatable, and I need to get across how unrelatable some of this stuff was, especially because of the messages that went along with these incidents that happened. So we moved to Mesa, and at least for the purpose of this part of the story, we get into smoking pot. Now, I'm divorced. I work my tail off. I go to school full time. I am working to do all these things. I also began having kids at a really young age. I use alcohol and cigarettes as a stress reliever. I don't go out very often. I don't have the money to. I don't have the means to. And I don't have a babysitter to do so for the most part. So somehow Jessica starts smoking pot. And of course, I'm her best friend at the time. So me and her start smoking pot together. And when we were teenagers, we had done it a little bit. I had only done it a couple times. But as an adult, we start getting into it. And it was this just feeling of like release at the time. I would say it was very medicinal in a way, because what I found myself wanting from it was just to sit and laugh. And I remember just sitting and laughing hysterically. And I have to tell you, it was the few joys I had during that time. Of course, it's illegal. I mean, we're talking 20 years ago, right? It's illegal. It's definitely not allowed in the cult. It's also something that I had been raised with. It was something that my parents did when we were in Austin. I was very aware of it. However, it didn't make it okay. Well, and my parents stopped once we moved to Arizona. So I remember just this ability to just relax and laugh my tail off. And we would just sit and laugh at the dumbest shit. And then slowly we started getting everybody else within our age group, and whoever was a couple years older and a couple years younger would get involved with us too. So we kind of had everybody we could smoking pot at the time. That did not go over well, because when it finally came out that we were, it was me and Jessica's fault. And it was definitely Jessica's fault too, because everybody knew that she was definitely one of the people who started it. And so I've shared the fear of phone calls. I cannot tell you the amount of time and the amount of anxiety it has taken for me to overcome the phone ringing and being worried that on the other end of the line was one of the teachers or somebody telling me that I was going to get called to a process, or calling me to rip me up for something, or calling me to tell me that I had to go to a trance, or that I had to go to a meeting, or that there was something. And it was always this like, I need to talk to you type of thing. And all of a sudden, that's what happened. We're all of a sudden in this situation where we're in so much trouble for not only smoking pot, which was very much illegal, but also, getting everybody else into it. And then right around that time, and then of course, my dad. My dad is the great enforcer, which every parent had to be, because there was always this expectation, and I've seen this a lot in religious circles, whether it's a church or just family dynamic, churchy religious situations, but where your children are considered a reflection of you. So if your child makes a mistake, it makes you look bad. So for me to be getting in trouble for something, it was a bad reflection on my parents, which meant, so that means that my dad has to come and he has to handle me to make sure that I'm not making the Walker name look bad and all these different things. And so then I'm getting, and plus I got my older sister to do it, and I got my younger brother to do it. And so then I'm getting these phone calls, and then my dad calls me and he begins to threaten me. And he starts threatening me. And my dad is, he's an attorney, and he does mainly family law at the time. And he starts threatening me that, that it could become a CPS issue. I don't remember if he threatened to call CPS on me. He may have threatened to call CPS on me and Jessica. And that, I could get my children taken away for smoking pot. All this different stuff. And I pretty much lost my shit at that point. Some of this stuff started coming to the point where it's like, the ridiculousness was just fucking insane. And I remember getting into a big fight with my dad about that one. Because I was like, really? And now I've worked for my dad for many years, and I know what a bad CPS case looks like. I've seen all kinds of horrible CPS cases, child abuse, like you name it, ugly stuff. A very functional mother who takes really good care of her kids and occasionally smokes pot, and could count the amount of times that she smoked pot on two hands, is not the person CPS is running to take their children away from. But that's the threat, right? And there's this, when it comes to, here's the problem with religion. This is just my overall issue if you have to threaten something to keep somebody in line, then your motives are probably not on point. The overarching theory of most backgrounds of religion come from a fear-based implementation of, if you don't walk the right path, this is the horror that will happen to you. And it's everything from hell, the devil, you'll have to relive life by reincarnation. Like, there's always this, it's never like the positive outcomes, it's the what if and this is what's going to happen. And so it's something that has become ingrained in our society, that there is a negative outcome for wrongdoings and wrong actions. But it also, on the flip side of that, then it also verifies positive actions if it's done in the name of God. So there's all the, thou shalt not kill, and, all the reasons why you can't do these things unless it's a God's will type of thing. And this is where interpretation comes in, and this is where everything basically goes to shit. I think the entire idea that there has to be a threatening to get somebody to uphold a way of living is damaging. And I think it is basing things on fear and shame. Fear and shame, fame, you know what I mean? So, and I don't think anything based in fear and shame is a strong motivator over a long period of time. I actually think that that's the opposite. I think that when we begin to base things in love and healing and health and growing, that it's actually much stronger. It just doesn't have the same pull sometimes initially as something that's fear-based. And part of that is because something that's fear-based is supposed to keep you from avoiding doing it again, meaning that it's a safety mechanism that's ingrained in us from learning to survive. It's survival based, right? So if you were to fall into, let's say, you're running in the woods and you were to fall into a pack of wolves, and you find yourself in this dangerous situation, anything that reminds you of that is assuming that you survive it, anything that reminds you of that is going to help you to make sure that you do not repeat that same situation. So there is a reason that fear is more easily ingrained in us, but that doesn't mean we live trying to avoid things. We should live in trying to grow, thrive, nurture. And in raising my own children, one of the things that I found that was a huge tipping point for me while getting out of the cult was nurturing, loving, and doing basically a lot of the things that were the opposite of what I had gotten in the cult. And it was also the thing that began to turn those relationships around. And I think it saved me and my kids' lives. And that's why I do this, because that's what I want to be able to teach you guys. So anyway, a little bit back to where we were talking about, this coming down because we were smoking pot. So that incident happens. And it's the whole blame game, the shame game, the make you feel like shit, make you feel like you have to make up for it and do penance and whatever that is, and pray more and meditate more and feel horrible for who you are as a person type of thing. It's just this cycle of being in this community. And then slowly that begins to get a little bit better. I think I probably almost didn't smoke pot after that until years later. And I never had the best relationship with it. I think that it was purely an escape mode at the time. I wanted something to make me smile and to make me laugh. And I was excited about trying to build something to get out of the dependency that I was in. But other than that, I didn't have like a lot of things to look forward to. So the other thing I want to talk about is dating. And I kind of talked last time about how I was going to talk about dating, but I want to explain the dynamics of it because I need you guys to understand my mindset into going into dating at that time. And again, I'm like early 20s. You know, I might be 25, 26 maybe at the time. I don't completely remember, but I'm going to guess that I was around that age. Maybe 27, 28, starting to get to those ages. But I had slowly gotten back into dating, which was kind of this up and down cycle. And the problem with it is my immense need for codependency, which is not particularly funny. But when I look back and I think about how codependent I was, it's hard for me to just relate to myself because I'm so not that person now. But I have to share, like I have to be real about who I was at the time. And I want to share with you why I was such a fucking confused person. So I'm going to go through some things and some messages that were regularly said in the cult so that you can understand me going out, trying to date, why I was so fucked up. Okay, so now one of the things, outside of the fact of being just like generally young and lonely and wanting the physical connection and affection, you know, there's a part of me that I've got 2 kids and I want somebody that's you know, can help support me and my children. And I want somebody to be a father to my kids. And we have this, one of the things is that in the teaching, it's like, whoever your husband is, he's also the father to your kids. This was the excuse for consistently men being able to leave their kids behind in other relationships that they were no longer in the cult. So I keep thinking that any guy that I date is going to become that. So I'm looking for somebody who's going to be a good dad and, you know, be a dad to my 2 little kids. But I've got this crazy codependency. So one of the things I'm always, like, I don't even look at dating like, do I like this person? I mainly look at dating is, do they like me? I think about how I was at the time, and I think about the amount of people that I probably threw off with what a crazy codependent person I was, outside of the fact that I had 2 little kids. The other thing is, you know, you're not supposed to have sex outside of your outside of your like vibration, right? So that's something we're constantly told all the time. So now anybody I date, I'm desperately trying to make my husband. Like, I don't say it off the bat, but in the back of my head, like, I have to validate if I'm going to get intimate with them that this has to be very meaningful, because otherwise it's not okay, you know. And I'm not in some kind of space of thinking that I could just date and be celibate at the same time. And I don't really want to be. So I keep trying to make, if I'm going to get intimate with anybody, into the fact that like they have to be really meaningful and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I should have just been able to do whatever I want. But like I told you in the last episode, I had already been ripped to shreds for having a one-night stand. Like, I mean, I was just like put through the fucking fire on that one. So now I'm like trying to do it all right and not fuck up again, because every time you fuck up, it's just exhausting. So other crazy shit that's always said, this is so you guys can wrap your head around how fucked up I was when I was trying to date. So first off, I have been emailed by a couple different people who used to be in the cult, who were one time sent to Denim and Diamonds and basically told to find a husband or, find a sperm donor, something along those lines. But that kind of stuff happened very regularly. Denim and Diamonds is a country bar, but that stuff happened in other instances and other bars too. So there was this I would say that women were used like sirens, like if they went out, like maybe they'd bring a man back that would be another member to the church, is my opinion about it. I'd say there's something about it that was kind of obvious. But the funny thing is then at the same time, I always remember we were always told too, you're not going to meet your husband / like vibration in a bar. So stop trying. But at the same time, it was like, oh, you need to go whore around. Trina used to always say shit like she dated more married than single. I remember her saying this all the way back to when I was a teenager, and I remember how confusing it was, and I didn't understand it. I basically get that she just, she got around. It's okay to be a whore with your husband. So this was always said to the women too. Basically, you better be fucking your husband well enough. Here's one that one of the ministers said, and more than once, if you won't fuck your husband, I'll find someone who will. And this was said sometimes in the middle of really heated processes. And it was always very confusing for me because there was this, oh wait, we're like vibrations, which means our relationship was ordained by God. But then it was like, but Trina could change it anytime she wanted to. And the funny thing is, the more I started hearing about the history from before my family showed up and in the early years when I was still a kid, and how many relationships were twisted and turned around and different people were put together. And even after that was done, people still stuck around because they were like, oh, well, that wasn't my like vibration. So even though their spouse has been put with somebody different, they okay the whole thing because they believe everything Duran says and about it being like vibration and purpose and all this other stuff. Even though it's Steven and Trina just fucking with people. Yeah, so if you won't fuck your husband, I'll find someone who will. So there was this constant degrading and the way that women were. And then there was this constant degrading if you were one of the single women about the way that you were at any given time around women and around men. Like, you basically couldn't be some level of competition. You couldn't be too attractive. You couldn't look too good. I think I shared how my sister was ripped to shreds at my wedding for wearing a very plain dress and how she was being too sexual. But there was an older woman who was single almost the entire time I knew her. And she used to stand a certain way, and she kind of would be like this. She would kind of have this sideways look and her hand on her hip and, this, and I can't quite explain it, especially if you're listening to this and you're not watching this on YouTube, but she would have one arm out and kind of sit, kind of lean to one side. And there was always this degrading way that she was referred to as being incredibly sexual. Women were degraded about their weight. They were judged about their ability to cook. They were judged whether they were feeding the men first. They were judged whether they were feeding the children first. It was expected, most of the time it was expected that men were to eat first. There was this judgment about whether or not you would feed another man's husband, which you were expected to feed another man's husband, but if you made some weird attempt to feed another man's husband, that could be easily turned around on you. So there was always this like, oh, well, Marlo always would feed anybody's husband who needs to be fed. But then there was this like, somebody else could be completely thrown under the bus for not properly feeding all the men who were hungry. Because there was this like, feed the men who are hungry type of thing. Like they're all fucking starving and none of them were. And so there was this very subservient attitude. And there was this very demeaning way that women were treated. So I share all of that, including this moment that would happen during processes where there were threats to women about their husbands and if they weren't doing their female duties. And the funny thing about this, you guys, is we were told that this was a feminine-based teaching. And still at the same time, the men were constantly let off the hook for everything other than maybe providing. But then again, all the women worked too, so it wasn't like the women weren't held to a standard there as well. So I share all this because I want you guys to understand, like, so then I'm going out there dating with all of this in my head, all of these crazy, confusing thoughts about relationships, and I was just a codependent nightmare about my expectations of what I was looking for. So as I begin to tell you guys about the people that I begin to date in my life, they honestly, in some ways, a lot of them weren't that bad. But at the other end of it, like, there's probably no way that I was going to get in a healthy relationship. I didn't know what a healthy relationship was. I didn't desire a healthy relationship because it wasn't even part of a thought of what I would even ever want. So I will get more into that in the next episode. But first, we're going to talk about codependency, because I think that I want to talk about what codependency is. I want to call it out. I'm going to specifically, let's just start with the definition of codependency. A psychological condition which the person can be manifesting low self-esteem and strong desire for approval, unhealthy attachment to another, often controlling or manipulative person. If that doesn't describe being in a cult, I don't know what does. So, I was able to find on a psychology website a lot of information about codependency, and I'm actually going to pretty much just do some high points for you here. The name of the website, in case anybody was interested in looking it up, just because I want to be able to cite it. Where did it go? I'll try to put it in the comments. But you can look this up. So, how to heal from codependency. And if you put that in, that is specifically what the article was called. So first off, and there's 5 steps on how to heal from codependency. Number 1, understanding denial patterns. So denial patterns are a couple different things. First off, denial of your own needs. So being codependent means that you are denying that you have needs, which I had gotten rid of at a very young age because of the cult. Denying your true feelings. So there was a lot of things that didn't align with me, but I was so used to going with what I was told, I wouldn't recognize those things. The impact of others' behaviors. So I allowed people to run me over and I was in denial about the way that other people would treat me and react to me because I blamed myself and made everything my fault. Denial of your own identity. I don't think that I even really knew who I was. Denial of unhealthy nature of a relationship. I would say every relationship around me was unhealthy, and I was in complete denial about all of them. And I'm sharing this with you guys because I want you guys to know, like, this is how I recognize it, and maybe you can turn it around and see if any of this resonates with you, because if you still have some of this, this is how you begin to unpack it so that you can have healthy relationships with family if you want, or a significant other, or your children, or your parents, or just even friendships. Healing some of that comes from awareness and compassion. You have to be aware of where you're in denial, and you have to have compassion. You have to love yourself. Have compassion for who you are and how you got to where you are, and that it's going to be okay. Number 2, low self-esteem patterns. Excessive self-judgment, which means you're consistently looking at yourself and judging who you are, what you are, why you are, and not... Typically, self-judgment is on the negative side of things. It typically is not on the positive side of things. So the negative voice in your head that's beating you up. Feeling unlovable and unworthy. And I want you guys to notice this as I begin to go through these as well. As I'm going through these, I want you guys to begin to recognize too, when I give you guys things that are healing, things to work on, a lot of them are to deal with these things. So the feeling unlovable and unworthy, that is one of the big reasons I've said to do mirror work, where you sit in the mirror and you say, I love you. It's very powerful. Looking at yourself in the mirror every day and finding something that you love about yourself. Because people cannot love you more than you love yourself. If you can't love yourself, how are others going to? Difficulty saying no. Now, I think that women have a harder time with this in general because there's an expectation, but healing self-esteem patterns means that you have to learn how and when to say no. And no, I did a whole thing about no one day, where no is one of the most loving things that you can do, because no is a really healthy boundary. And it also means that you don't stretch yourself past what you're able and capable of doing. And also, when you say no, it starts getting you to the point that you don't have the level of resentment. Fear of abandonment. So a lot of people have a fear of abandonment. So so we get ourselves in these situations where we have this codependency, but then we have this fear of being abandoned. So we keep ourselves in it, when the truth is the relationship's not healthy anyway. And because of that, we have to heal that, you have to seek internal validation and embrace mistakes. Number 3, compliance patterns. Suppression of self, which goes right along with denial, right? Compromising personal values. I talked a lot about getting in touch with your personal values on another episode. Getting in touch with your personal values means that you can't just throw them aside all the time. Loss of identity. Again, the more that you get in touch with this person, the more that you're not going to lose your identity. And how you heal that is evaluate motivations, establish and maintain boundaries, and practice assertiveness. Practicing assertiveness is actually a lot of fun. If you haven't done it, it's just taking little baby steps. And it's not about coming at somebody. It's just about slowly like asking for things. And it kind of depends on where you are. I might go into that on another episode. Number 4, control patterns. Excessive caretaking, people pleasing, and manipulation. And manipulation can actually go both ways. We heal that through understanding underlying fears. So getting in touch with really what is the fear? What is the worst case scenario? Because a lot of times our fears are not nearly as bad as we might think. Learning to focus on yourself is a way to help heal it too. Like, if you can't put it on everything around you and you just have to put it here, it's hard to be codependent. Let go of fixing others. And then the last one, number 5, is avoidance patterns. So avoidance patterns include addiction, isolation, and perfectionism. I fell into perfectionism. I fell into addiction some. I could drink with the best of them. And I would say there's still a part of me that when I'm stressed wants to lean towards alcohol. But at the same time, like, I don't have a very unhealthy relationship with any substance these days. I rarely do anything. And then to heal those, facing fears, seeking help. Get help from somebody else. We can't do everything alone. And then practice open communication. I would say seek help from somebody that you're not codependent with. Practicing open communication. Sometimes you can take a lot of stigma away just by talking about it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed today's episode. That is pretty much it for today. We will get into some more details of the dating life, but I wanted to kind of give you that like understanding of what that looked like. And then I really wanted to talk about codependency because I think that as I was doing a little research on it and, just putting some of it into words, it explains a lot why I think people join cults. There's a big piece of codependency in there. And I mean, there's the other side that people get into too of wanting to join cults. I mean, there's the appeal of the caringness and the family orientation and shared values. Like, we can't throw away the positive part of what draws people to these groups. Like, that's very real. So anyway, thank you guys so much and look forward to seeing you guys next time. Bye-bye.